In today's video, we'll be doing another flip attempt, because I still haven't sold the Dell. Speaking of Dell, I need to get the thing away. Alright, let's get our parts in first. Assuming that still works even after that. Let's first unbox our very suspiciously light box of a motherboard. This might as well be a scam from how light this thing is. Please stop using packing peanuts to box your confusing components. Please. Packing. Cutting this open with my favorite screwdriver. Let's handle this delicately now, actually, that the bubble wrap's being removed. That's a lot of protection for a motherboard. Back to the unboxing. Hope I didn't scratch anything. That kills the motherboard. We can blame it on the seller. Hope not. Really actually like this motherboard. Hope a little small scratches on the motherboard don't mean anything. This here's our motherboard. It is a H310M from Asus, and from the looks of it, at least from this angle, it is pretty decent. Until we look at everything closer. Pretty bare bones. Let's get to work. Intentional or not, this thing does not come with an I/O shield. So unless I magically find it randomly, we're gonna have to run with this naked on the back when it's installed in the case. So let's actually test this with a piece of metal. That's not a good idea. The greatest technician that's ever lived. And I didn't record the turn on sequence, which would have been nice to viewership. But anyways, it works. It works. Hopefully it stays that way when I assemble it. Let's excuse me. Let's meet our horrible case. This is an HP something. It has got one USB port because the other one broke. It used to have an i5 from the first generations of i5s, and then Intel killed the naming scheme. And it is excuse me. And it is complete doo-doo. There is nothing good about this PC, and it's got a power supply in it that will most likely blow up. But we're gonna torture it and see what happens. So we might lose the entire system, we might make a decent flip. Who knows? As for our cooler, we got a Thermalite. We got a Thermalite 920mm to fit it, so we don't run into any clearance issues. Yeah, because I didn't think a normal 120mm might fit in here without, you know, causing it to scrape. So let's meet our GPUs. Yes, I mean plural, because we're gonna see which GPU is more fit for the task. Here we have two previously tortured GPUs. Our RX 6600, which has been used in my 4060 video, and our A380, which has been used on our little old PC test. Now let's stuff them in a more modern PC. Modern-ish, 8th gen 9th gen i5 isn't much better. Speaking of i5s, our CPU in this system that cannot be identified by the camera because, oh, it can be identified by the camera. But it is, anyways, it's an i5 9500. And it is a 6-core, 6-thread piece of crap. When this thing was new, you should have been buying Ryzen. Because later down the line, Ryzen CPUs, as we do have a Ryzen CPU next to us, which we'll be pitting against in a later video, will completely dunk on this piece of thing. But wait, wouldn't it be unfair? Because said Ryzen, we can assume, is younger than it? Yes, that's the whole point. Because when this thing was new, you could have bought a Ryzen, I don't know, 1600, and then later upgrade to the 5000 series Ryzen, and use the same motherboard, RAM, GPU, and storage. Although I recommend you upgrade your GPU if you're upgrading your CPU. And then that made Ryzen more future-proof. And unlike Intel, who decided to new socket every 2 generations, like, you can do better. Ryzen did better. They managed to cram new nanometer processes into their Zen CPUs. Anyways, on to our commodity this day. As for our RAM during this December 5th, things have gotten bad. I really wanted to do a DDR5 system, but as of today, RAM has skyrocketed to the points I probably should have bought it when it was not gonna happen. But I couldn't have predicted this, so it is what it is, and we got to work with 16 gigs of DDR4 2666. As for our storage, even though I'm going to use our test SSDs, when this thing goes to the eBay market, we're going to be putting a Patriot 256 gig, even though I would not recommend that. I'm kind of poor right now. So 256 gigs of NVMe storage is 256 gigs of NVMe storage. I haven't... No. Assembly time. First let's install our cooler, since that's gonna be a main hassle, or at least cooling mounting kit. Ow. First, let's install our backplate. Comes with sticky sticky M5 to stick on the back of the motherboard, so we don't have to hold it in while screwing in things. Install on the motherboard. And it is set to the wrong settings. time to install our spacers. Assuming they are the right spacers for the job. Otherwise, we will have some cooling instability issues. Now let's install it in the case. Fortunately, due to the seller being sneaky and hiding the fact that this poor thing does not have an I/O shield, we unfortunately do not have an I/O shield. Hooray! We're being cheapskates. AIDS is getting us nowhere. So almost every hole in this motherboard lines up, except one, which will be fine as long as nothing shorts out. God, please don't. Okay, it does not fit. Change of plans, guys. We gotta use a spare case. So after changing, this is our new case. It's a Zalman T6. It absolutely stinks. Like, doesn't smell. Of course doesn't. Why would it? But in the sense that it sucks. Like, come on. Deal with. It's got Velcro in it for some reason because it's too cheap to get more SSD mounting. It's got this spoolie thing. It's USB 2.0 and one 3.0 somehow. A single fan in here and a single fan in the front. What a blessing for airflow. Totally not gonna make me want to jump off a bridge. Am I going to talk about the case? Should I? I've already started work on it. Yeah, let's talk. I'll talk about it. The Zalman T6, in better demonstration, is a cheap $40 case I got from Amazon. It comes with a DVD player, a mesh front, side panels, and screw holes for SSD mounts. And that's where the luxuries end, as everything else in this case kind of sucks. It's basically an older computer case given 120mm fan housings. I don't know what kind of man would daily drive this, but I don't. But I feel sorry for them. I did, this was my test bench for PC for a while, but I eventually hated it. The cable management was non-existent, and the backside was non-existent. Lots of things were not very nice with this thing. There is the ability to hide your cables at the back, but that was more of a suggestion considering the gap between the actual computer, the actual board, and the case itself. Now for our power supply. We won't be endangering ourselves. Instead, we will be using an old power supply from Cooler Master. A 460 watt power supply. Better than a literal bomb from BizTech. What the heck, HP? Once that 3.0 goes in, it never comes back out. As a friend from Nicaragua once said, sad facts. HD audio. Now how are we going to get both fans powered? With a inexpensive USB no. Inexpensive. It's a fan header splitter that will totally not be a nightmare to cable manage. Number one. Number two. Route them around. We'll cable tie that. And now for the I'll do that off camera. For now, for the CPU power. Thing. First, we shall be testing the Intel Arc. Why? God knows why. Oh. And don't worry, Intel fans, we shall be using resizable bar if this motherboard supports it, which I do hope it does. What happens when you screw in a single PCIe slot too many times? You get a pretty worn out hole. Giggity. Yeah. Build's done, everything except storage. Because, you know, test SSD. In Team Fortress 2, 1080p, DX9, we see that we're doing pretty decently in terms of FPS. Our 1% lows are near 60, our 0.1% lows is a 60, our average is around 100, is in the 3-digit zone. And it's miss. But anyways, let's talk about the Intel Arc that's in this system currently. It is drawing a pretty low amount of watts. Come on. Go Scout. It's drawing a decent amount of watts. And if you get the Sparkle version, you can most definitely do a low profile system. But most OEM systems that you can fit the small low profile version of the card in does not support rebar. And this thing does, which is kind of weird actually. But speaking of rebar, I personally think that having resizable bar over PCIe 4.0 is pretty worth it. Of course, the Arc A380 will do better in a cheap PCIe 4.0 system with an AM4 CPU, but seeing as it's currently RAM-pocalypse, cheaping out on CPU and motherboard just to get a decent amount of DDR is definitely is a more than reasonable compromise considering everything. Oh shit. Oh. But anyways, as I was talking about AM4, if you already have an AM4 system, you can drop in a more modern CPU and this graphics card. AV1 encoding will do you nice, and 6 gigabytes of VRAM for the Arc A380's price point is definitely nothing to complain about. Of course, everyone's talking about how 8 gigabytes of VRAM isn't enough these days, but 6 gigabytes is definitely good for some low 1080p titles. And since we're... Damn! But 6 gigabytes is definitely enough for some low 1080p titles. And as long as you're not playing Battlefield 6, you don't have to drop the resolution scale at all. But we will definitely get more performance out of the RX 6600. But though, we won't get the RX 6600's full performance as we are running in PCIe 4.0 with the thing. So we'll see. We'll have to see. In Overwatch 1080p high preset, we see ourselves dealing with some interesting things. Our 0.1% low is fluctuating a little. Seems to be at a stable 48 for now. 1% low on 54 and average around 60. Although I cannot. Oh, there goes MSI Afterburner. Whoa, go. Oh, ooh. Ooh. Damn. As for our ARC A380, we seem to be drawing less than 50 watts on average, although that could be due to the Intel ARC not being fully utilized because of its PCIe 3.0 speeds that it's currently in. But it's still giving us a decent amount of FPS for what it's currently having to deal with, a CPU bottleneck, and a CPU that seems to be heating up to 70 degrees. Not to be expected from an air cooler that is 92 millimeters in height. And last time I checked, it does not have that many heat pipes, I hope. At least, but any cheap tower cooler, if you're gonna make something like this yourself, would probably be a 120 millimeter in height, and should probably perform better than this, unless you're going for ITX. So then a cooler this size would make sense. Gildan. Anyways, we're using FSR 1.0 because that's just what the high preset is. I don't know why, but they just use it. But FSR can be turned off and on depending on preference. It's all up to you and all up to your situation. Because with our current PC rising, FSR is definitely gonna be more popular, being able to be utilized in mostly every GPU. And lots of people are gonna complain because FSR has its flaws and bonuses. But personally, I think FSR is a great way to make a low power card at least push close to 60 FPS. Especially when trying times where you can't be picky, because you gotta save all the budget for RAM. Uh-oh. And I died. We might be FPS limited due to the monitor hertz, but seeing as our 1% lows are pretty low despite our GPU settings, I think it's pretty normal. In World of Warships 1080p medium settings, we see that our little Intel ARC A380 does pretty well. I mean, we've already demonstrated that with older CPUs, but with actual rebar, our 1% lows are pretty high, and above 60 our 0.1% lows are still stuttering, but it's definitely better than before without rebar. Averages are above 100 FPS, although I would take that 132 with a grain of salt. In terms of performance, this World of Warships usually runs DX11, though it can be configured to run DX12 as natively Intel ARC uses a translation layer to run DX9 and DX11 games. Although there is nothing wrong with this, it is still a translation layer, meaning that natively it is not running the game natively. So that means latency and other issues, like especially with compatibility. CPU wise, even though the CPU is a 6-core, it is not a very good 6-core. As we can see our CPU being nearing the 100 zone, but doing pretty decently in terms of wattage and temperature. For pretty poor performance, it is at least not drawing a crap ton amount of watts. like modern Intel CPUs. But with the recent upcoming Arrow Lake refresh, I think we might be actually getting some performance. And before I get destroyed by 4 other ships that like to seem to be targeting me and that Valesperio, I will be retreating and burning down as that happens. Go, Uzumo, go! Why is this ship designed with no rear turret? But otherwise, I'd say this setup does pretty well in World of Warships. You can go to a higher setting and turn on FSR, but if you're not a fan of Fidelity FX, I think medium settings is your go-to. Of course, with a better CPU, you might be able to do even better, as we've seen before. The GTX 1060 and a Ryzen 5500 does pretty well. Although, I honestly should have never sold that 1060 from EVGA. Oh, we can always get a new one. If this channel does well. We'll have to see. Not forgetting to record this time, we're going to be unscrewing. I should have probably put this on a tripod. But anyways, we're going to be removing our little ARC A380 and making sure we don't kill ourselves. That single fan spin is enough voltage to probably electrocute someone. So always make sure to discharge your components of electricity. Or just yank the cord. Either way, it all depends on the person. I'm not Chrisfix. I don't run a car channel. I'm not organized. And because I need to put it down, delatch. What? Oh. It's a trigger lock. You don't push any pins, it's just a trigger. Although you can't probably see. Oh yeah, there it is. Out with our old A380. A380, yeah. It's not that old, but it's actually still getting driver support. But we have superior options that are still getting driver support. Actually might not be getting driver support as it was once threatened. Bold move to say what was happening, AMD. Bold move. And struggling to fit this fat giant in. It only from ASRock. We get stuck as a bug. And break the PCIe slot potentially. Screwing it in so it doesn't break. And since the screw really has no tension, it's more of a suggestion. And I didn't angle the camera to record all that. Oh well. Let's hope our 460 watt power supply doesn't combust from this combination.
Is it a counter random failure?
Oh, mildly. As I'm too lazy to set up a tri-stand, I'm just gonna place my camera on the bed and we're gonna call it that. So our power supply has failed. And we're just to no one's surprise as this thing is like ish years old. Ish. And now it's my job to uninstall it and pray that I can make money as we install what can be only described as the MSI MAG the A750GL PCIe 5, which is all fancy saying for this thing supports NVIDIA's bullshit. And what I mean by NVIDIA's bullshit, I mean the power connector that spontaneously catches on fire. Don't worry, we're not using that, as we're using regular 8 pins. Although, unfortunately, some higher end MSI power supplies don't support 8 pins anymore. And whether that's due to MSI not liking Radeon or wanting to prioritize NVIDIA is all up to speculation. Well, that's old news. And right now we're dealing with new news. And MSI decided to make life harder. As we zoom in here, you can see that little tweeze thing that's holding this power connector together. Not a bad thing, just mildly annoying. Using a Swiss Army knife, we've managed to separate the bastard. And praying it goes in the right direction and I don't install a house fire. Dang it. Okay. With that click, it's time to test if it's a power supply failure. I don't know anymore. Oh, we could sort out the pins and test if it's a motherboard failure. Yay! The sound of optimism. Wow, this thing was running. To be fair, this thing had absolutely no. But before anything else, let's give our power supply a test. Oh, thank God, it's a faulty power cable. Well, that solves it. In World of Warships 1080p medium settings, no FSR, and minor anti-aliasing, we see that we're doing pretty well. 0.1% lows are near 60, 1% lows near 80 to 90, and our averages are around 100. Well, excuse me, 120 to be exact. Not much of a difference between our arc, but there is a visible difference in terms of power draw for our FPS. Our little 6600 is doing barely nothing, and it's drawing only 30 watts, which is pretty power efficient considering what it is. But that could also be down to CPU bottleneck, as a 9500 in a crappy H310M motherboard is definitely not going to boost at all. Like, I'm pretty sure this CPU has a boost. I just never seen it boost. Ever. And it's not a heat issue. 68, 65, not a problem for CPU cooling. It's just that this motherboard does not have the headroom to give a single more watt than what's currently being outputted. GPU temps are fine. A little stutter here and there. But that's to be expected. World of Warships is a older game. And I'm running on a Wi-Fi to USB dongle. And it doesn't have a single antenna. It is literally just a dongle. The RX 6600, in comparison to the A380, is definitely a big one. The thing with Radeon, even though their drivers are not sketchy, but how they're handling their drivers is a little sketchy, because there was that whole confusion fiasco where they said they were gonna cut off 6600. Cut off 6000 series drivers and 5000 series drivers. Although I don't know who would be rocking a 5000 series Radeon. When RT is becoming certainly more present, the A380 can definitely do RT. It is within Alchemist's ability to do ray tracing, but the RX 6600 has a little more muscle in terms of core, and 2 gigs more of VRAM. 8 gigabytes isn't bad. It is just bad when it's still coming out on new cards that should have a little more. It is very possible to make an affordable, cheap card with 10 gigs. Doesn't need a B16. Doesn't need to have a bunch of chips. It can just be a 10 gig card, like a certain, I don't know, Intel GPU. Anyways, I should probably be focusing on the game instead of just yapping. Mackenberg.
Well, as of time of recording, it is now January 2nd, 2026. I started recording this in December 2025, and I procrastinated so long, a year has passed. Procrastination at its finest. And I should probably be recording my voice after playing this. It's been a solid minute since I've recorded my own voice while doing hardware reviews, but we're doing pretty well. If I remember correctly, the Intel Arc A380 wasn't doing too hot in Team Fortress 2, but this is the RX 6600, and it is currently not available new. Why would I choose this card? I just had it lying around. Actually, I did it in the initial video explain why I'm choosing this card. But anyways, if we had put it in that little case of a old HP, it would have probably overheated to hell. So probably a good thing we swapped over to a less ass case. I don't know. I'll probably look it up what it is on editing, but it's done wonders for us in terms of ventilation. Our RX 6600 can draw air from the front of the case, as the case has front fan mounting, and actually has a fan mounted at the front. Although I installed that myself rather than it coming with the case. But hey, options are pretty good. As for our CPU, a 92mm tower cooler does little to nothing for us cooling our CPU. At that rate, we would have just went with an Intel stock cooler from an appropriate time, this being an i5 9500 and all. Now, as for FPS, our 1% lows are around 200, 0.1% lows 170, 168. Let's put it at that. Averages of nearing 200 to 250. Let's put it at 230 for mathematics sakes. Thanks. And that's because how do I word this? For the reason why we're getting better FPS for the RX 6600 is not because it's a whole different class of card, even though it is. It's because it's actually running this game natively DirectX 9. Because Intel Arc uses translation layers for DirectX 11 and DirectX 9 games, meaning that the Intel Arc card has to do the extra work of running the translation layer along with running the game itself. As for our CPU and motherboard, the cheap motherboard won't let the CPU drink more than 60 watts, even though this CPU won't drink 60 watts at all, and but it at least supports resizable bar with a BIOS update. Although that's where the good things end, as this motherboard only supports PCIe 5.0, PCIe 3.0, meaning if you put a PCIe 4.0 card, you lose some performance. But it gets even worse when you put in a PCIe 4.0 card, 5.0 card. I should not play Scramble. Peace. But anyways, most likely since you're building with an i5 9th gen, it's presumably safe to assume that you're going to be buying a pretty cheap graphics card that might start with a GTX or an RX series with no RT cars. But then again, and I hope you choose an AM4.
Do I not matter to you, or?
God damn it, TF2. Oh, fuck, ah! Well, that was insane. Anyways, where was I? Right. For around the same price as this motherboard, you can get a used AM4 board, and you will get more features like NVMe, better CPUs, PCIe 4.0 if you're lucky. But that's where the goodness ends. As older Intel CPUs are way more abundant. And what I mean by that is that there are hundreds of 8th gen i5s laying in eBay, and there are only so few. Oh, I thought I was spy. And there is only so few AM4 CPUs lying around.
Spyro did not know how OP the Darwins was. Feel sorry for him.
Oh. As for AMD CPUs, you can barely find them used market, and they charge you what is essentially a new CPU for an old used AM4 CPU. So your luck would be best if you would buy someone's old gaming rig that was AM4, or praying to gods above that someone actually has a brain and reasonably prices a AM4 socketed CPU. And the match is already done, so meaning I can't talk anymore without just rambling to an empty title screen. So, let's move on to Overwatch. In Overwatch 1080p Ultra settings, FSR1, we see that we're doing pretty well. better 1% lows all around, a better average, but overall we have our main bottleneck is our motherboard and CPU. Oh, our so main overall bottleneck is our motherboard and CPU. So it's not much to talk about in terms of the GPU doing much, but rather, dang. but rather how this is performing altogether. Well, for an RX 6600 combo and oopsies. RX 6600 combo and i5 9500, we're doing pretty well. Of course it's not perfectly ideal, but you can find used 6600s for pretty cheap, and you can find these in 8th gen i5 or this exact 9th gen if you're feeling picky for pretty cheap, as Intel CPUs are very abundant from, you know, being used in many offices and homes and Dell Optiplexes that are now being cut up and and harvested. You can reuse their RAM. You can reuse their you can reuse their RAM. You can reuse the CPU, and that's about it. Unless it has a GPU, you can reuse that. But overall, harvesting a Dell Optiplex is not very English ramped up. Doesn't offer much to give to the table. Well, I'm heading back. No clue what to save now. Tracer. Anyways, as we're about to lose.
Final thoughts. And I think it should surprise absolutely no one that this PC does decently in free-to-play games, and nothing really AAA we've tested out. But that's for a reason. As if you're gonna be building a system like this, I don't think you're gonna be playing AAA games. You obviously can try and install it, but considering the fact the SSD capacity in here is going to be only 256 gigabytes. I don't think you're going to fit more than one AAA game. When you can fit hundreds of literal games, indie dev games, free-to-play games, you're probably going to be losing money to free-to-play games because of skins. But anyways, you could definitely install those on a 256 gig SSD, or you can... That's screwed. Or you can upgrade later. That's always an option. But considering this is just supposed to be a get built, get out of here kind of system, and also considering we don't have an IO shield, this is pretty shit. I should be charging a limb for this, actually. This is Ramageddon in here. It is... But no, I'm not charging Ramageddon prices for gaming. I just like the building process, not really in it for the money. Gotta move the tripod out of the way to install the NVMe. Pop. Yeah, that ain't moving anywhere. Pushable, but not moving. Now for our installed GPU, we're going to be installing the Intel Arc that's clicked in. Now to hold it down so it doesn't decide to become a projectile and shipping. This is the oldest case I've had for a test bench, and while it's been great as a test bench, it's tired, and it should probably be living its days out as an actual PC and not a piece of shit I found on Amazon. And we'll be doing some cable management to make so that shit don't start flying. I feel like I'm swearing unnecessarily, but I like swearing, honestly. The power supply in here might combust, but that's honestly to be expected. It is a random power supply I found on the market. Plug. Let's unplug our boot drive. Let's unplug our SATA drive. SATA drive. I need those SATA cables back. Because some people obviously don't need them. And now to tidy things up with some cable ties. Let's Alright, going off prices, we spent $48.59 on the motherboard. We spent the RAM I got for free, which is for free from a friend years back, family, or whatever. But considering RAM prices today, let's go and assume it is $200 for this RAM. Nah, it's probably like 80 when it was old. Cranky. I bought some really short zip ties. Cable ties, to be exact. And our Intel Arc A380, which will be the main selling point of this, it's pretty decent for what it is. Although I think its more selling point would be rather its oh god, come on. I think the selling point of the Intel Arc A380 would be its AV1 encoding. Considering the fact that it only has 6 GB of VRAM, not much to talk about, not much to boast. But the good thing about this is it can be used as a home server. If someone wants to just buy this and rip out the A380, and then dump the rest for parts. Ha ha ha. But other things to talk about is the CPU, which I could have been using. And I pulled the i5 9th gen from an old Optiplex. Not much to talk about there other than its abundance. You can easily replicate this at any point, considering how abundant 8th gen and 9th gen Intel are, and pretty cheap too compared to any used Ryzen out there. Even 1st gen Ryzens cost a limb. It's not gonna short out anything. cut, cut. Everything else could use cable tie. Okay. As long as resizable bars on and the correct drivers are installed, everything should be fine. Hopefully. Make sure that cables don't move around. We'll be using the double zip tie method. 2 zip ties to each other to form a little tie. And done. And as you can hear my mother screaming for my sister. Sister, I think this is a good time to talk about. This is a good point to end the video. If you liked what you saw, leave a like. If you like me and the channel, subscribe. If you don't like what you saw, leave a dislike. If you have a comment, leave a comment. See ya!